Hi there. My name is Sarah Sarzynski, and I'm a professor of Latin American history in the CMC History Department. And today I'd like to share with you some ideas that came from an article in this book, Representing Blackness, Issues in Film and Video. I'd like to share some of the ideas of James Snead, professor, writer, and film scholar, and someone who's not as well known as he should be, perhaps, because he died very young at the age of 35 of AIDS-related complications. Snead's article, Spectatorship and Capture in King Kong, The Guilty Look, influenced my scholarship and the ways that I came to understand the concept of structural racism, a term commonly employed today. I'd like to draw attention to some of his insights about King Kong and the King Kong franchise and how it relates to this concept of structural racism in this video. In this article, James Snead argues that there are three filmic devices used to confine Blacks to minor significance in all Hollywood films: mythification, marking, and omission. So I'm just going to go through with some examples of what this means. Mythification means that there's a replacement of history with a surrogate ideology of elevation or demotion. What this means is that it implies that there's a pool of spectators that are out there ready to accept and identify with the myths that are presented in the film. So I'm going to show you a clip from King Kong to sort of show how this mythification works in terms of creating a history of Black Africans as savages.
Badu! Makaminako in sorrow! Hey, let's scram out of here. Stand still, you fool. Steady, boys. Bluff 'em.
The simplified plot of King Kong involves filmmaker Carl Denham traveling to Skull Island to make a film about a monster known as King Kong. The mythification in these scenes work because they tell a story of African people as primitive savages, in contrast to the white explorers and filmmakers. This means that there has to be a group or a pool of spectators watching the film who believe that Africans are primitive savages and believe in these ideas of a white superiority. The plot continues as Carl Denham employs Ann Darrow as an actress, who is then captured on Skull Island by King Kong. The explorers rescue Darrow, capture King Kong, and bring him to New York City to put on display. Kong escapes, grabbing Darrow and climbing to the top of the Empire State Building, where he's shot by planes and falls to his death. Another filmic device used to confine Blacks to minor significance on screen, according to James Snead, is through marking. Blackness is overmarked to eliminate ambiguity, since in reality, black and white refer to a wide range of hues, not simply a dichotomy of black versus white or black and white being very clear-cut. So characters have to be overmarked by black and white coatings using face paint, articles of clothing, accents, and in the case of King Kong, you see this through both the savages being using drums, face paint, feathers, and a lack of clothing, while also seeing King Kong himself as some type of racialized monster. The third filmic device that Snead argues used to confine Blacks to minor significance on screen is through omission. And this means that by exclusion by reversal, distortion, or some other form of censorship. And this is actually, Snead argues, the most common form of Black stereotypes in Hollywood films, the repetition of Black absence from locations of autonomy and importance. In other words, there are no Black explorers or people of color in the expedition crew who are filmmakers, politicians, or even in the audience once King Kong goes back to New York and is on spectacle. There are no Black people whatsoever on the streets of New York City in 1933. And so this sort of repetition of Black absence emphasizes, again, the ways in which structural racism works in popular culture to create these notions of a white superiority and presence and a Black absence or inferiority. So what I find incredibly cool about Snead's analysis is his ability to look at spectatorship. And he looks at this through three different plot transformations that I'm just going to focus on the last one of spreading the guilt, right? Because this is a part of his main argument. And within this plot transformation, he tries to understand something that film scholars have a really hard time trying to understand, and that is, how do spectators, how does the audience feel when they're watching the film? Who do they identify with, and why do they enjoy watching this film? So first, it's important to note that audiences don't identify only with those in a film who share their same race or sex. Filmic spaces can be subversive, allowing for an oscillation between possible roles. Some spectators watching King Kong might identify with Anne in her fear or her reactions to terror, although Snead argues that this is problematic for a Black spectator. Men might identify with Kong to live out their repressed sexual fantasies, but the ending of the film and Kong's public execution by a firing squad might elicit different responses for white and Black spectators. As Snead argues, a white male viewer might sense in Kong's death a cleansing of his previous identification with the beast. A Black viewer might not only reject the price Kong pays for his own guilt, but would also wonder why there is no price to be paid by Kong's explorers. While the original King Kong movie was released during a period of race riots, lynching, and state-sanctioned deprivation of Black civil rights, what I want to ask is why and how so many other versions of King Kong continue to be released in U.S. popular culture, and what this says about the structures of racism that define the American experience. So when we look at films like those associated with the King Kong franchise that tend to privilege whiteness and disadvantage people of color, this is what we refer to when we talk about the concept of structural racism. In other words, it's not just one individual doing this or one institution, but that certain ideas about U.S. culture and its history are represented to the point where they become naturalized or not questioned in society. That we could go to New York City and buy a t-shirt with King Kong on it today tells us that, again, this is something that has been perpetuated within society that lacks even a deeper analysis or a questioning of why is it that we continue to support and enjoy productions of King Kong.